I have no doubt that this is not our missile, not our strike.
That's not the evidence.
Who fired the missile? We asked you this question last night on the show. Today we want to revisit it. We know the sequence of events by now. Poland's military was placed on high alert after a missile landed on a village on Tuesday. It killed 2 people. We know what happened after that. Poland and other NATO allies went into an overdrive, trying to establish facts. So where did the missile come from? The US says it was unlikely that the missile was fired from Russia. Poland says it was highly likely that the missile was fired by Ukraine. But Ukraine says it wasn't theirs. Do you see a pattern here? The stories don't add up, and there's a clear division between the narratives of Ukraine and the West. So on Gravitas tonight, we explore: is Ukraine at odds with its allies? If so, what will be the implications of this at this stage in the war? So on Tuesday, a missile struck Poland, a direct consequence of the war in Ukraine. We witnessed the first fatalities on NATO turf. Initially, all fingers pointed at Russia. The event raised fears of a direct NATO intervention in the war. So much so that World War III was trending for a while on Twitter. Thankfully, that didn't happen. The fog of war has now settled. But what happened yesterday has exposed the divisions between Ukraine and the West. Let me explain. It began with Zelensky's statement. He was loud and clear. The missile that struck Poland was Russian and not Ukrainian, he said. Take a listen.
I have no doubt that this is not our missile, not our strike. There is no sense for me not to trust them. I went through war with them and with you.
Zelensky's initial response was an emphatic no. But in this instance, his allies disagreed with him. Let's now look at those reactions one by one. First, NATO. It says the missile was fired by a Ukrainian air defense system, and it was fired in self-defense.
It's most likely Ukrainian air defense systems or missiles. But again, this is not Ukraine's fault. That missile doesn't have the characteristics of an attack. And therefore, that explains also why the reactions were as they were.
Poland agrees. The Polish President Andrzej Duda said the strike was an unfortunate accident. Even the United States, which is the biggest supporter of Ukraine, agrees. Listen in.
Our information supports what President Duda said earlier in his preliminary assessment, was that this was most likely a result of a Ukrainian air defense missile. But we'll let the investigation play out here.
Of course, only a comprehensive investigation can clear this up. But you see, Poland, NATO and the United States, they all seem to be on the same page. They all believe that the missile was Ukrainian. And they all think that it hit Poland by accident. Guess who else agrees? Russia. Yes, Moscow is not challenging the West this time. In fact, the Kremlin has praised America.
Poland has all possible opportunity to report that those fragments were from a rocket of an S-300 system. At that moment, all specialists will understand that this rocket has nothing to do with the Russian military. There's a sense to pay attention to the American side, who are restrained and much more professional in their reaction.
That's some rare praise indeed. What's also rare is the difference of opinion between Ukraine and the backers in the West. They agree on almost everything. Now look at this. Yesterday, when Zelensky insisted the missile was Russian, US President Joe Biden dismissed his claims publicly so. What happened in front of the international press, perhaps, that forced the Ukrainian president to rethink. He has reached out to his allies again.
Ukraine's position is very clear. We strive to establish all the details, every fact. That is why we need our specialists to join the work of the international investigation and for us to get access to all the data available to our partners and to the site of the explosion.
A call for an international probe. Did Zelensky concede there that his first assessment could have been wrong? Obviously, we shouldn't jump to conclusions, but there is good reason why Zelensky doesn't want a rift with the West right now. This is a crucial time in the war. Winter is coming. The Russian forces are on retreat. Zelensky cannot risk losing his diplomatic and military supporters. He'll be handing Russia their greatest advantage. After all, the united Western front against Russia is Ukraine's biggest asset. The West has collectively sanctioned Russia. They are arming Ukraine against the Russian military. They are giving tactical and diplomatic support. Any differences, like the one we witnessed yesterday, could drive a wedge between Kyiv and the West. And Russia realizes that, so much so that it has intensified its attacks against the West.
It was Ukrainian missiles that crossed into Polish territory, launched by Ukrainian air defense systems. This means that this is not just an intentional attempt of disinformation, but a conscious attempt to involve NATO, which is conducting a proxy war with Russia and Ukraine, to involve it into direct conflict with our country.
Now that's a reference to the comments by Western leaders. Since yesterday, we have seen a flurry of reactions. Yes, American and European leaders did say that the missile could have been Ukrainian. That helped in avoiding a further escalation. But the West is still defending Ukraine. Western leaders say that Kyiv has the right to respond if the Russians attack. But Ukraine's tough line is not helping its cause. Consider this tweet now. It is from Ukraine's foreign minister. He dismissed the claim that the missile was Ukrainian. In fact, he labeled it a conspiracy theory. Let us remember the jury is still out. It is not just missile strikes that raise the threat of an escalation. Off-the-cuff remarks too have the potential to cause the same level of damage. Let's move on now. We've said this in the past. The Pakistani Taliban is a volcano waiting to erupt. One that could engulf the entire country in flames. This warning is not unwarranted. In 2022, Pakistan witnessed a 51% rise in terror attacks. There were at least 250 attacks this year, which killed more than 433 people and injured at least 719. So who was behind these attacks? Well, a majority of them were carried out by the TTP, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, aka the Pakistani Taliban. No matter what you call it, it remains a menace at best. Not just for the Pakistan government, but also for the country's army and its provincial police forces. Just look at what it did on Wednesday. TTP terrorists killed 6 Pakistani policemen. The attack unfolded in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and officials say that the policemen were on a routine patrolling exercise when they were ambushed by armed men. This attack is one of the deadliest in recent months and the 4th such on law enforcement officials. There have been similar attacks throughout this year. On the 6th of February 2022, TTP terrorists killed 5 Pakistani soldiers. They're said to have fired on them from across the Durand line. Then, on February 22nd, TTP claimed responsibility for a grenade attack on a police post in Peshawar. At least 4 policemen were killed in that attack. On the 23rd of March, TTP terrorists carried out an attack in North Waziristan. It claimed the lives of 4 Pakistani soldiers. All these incidents point towards a routine. Every few months, the TTP unleashes a new attack on Pakistani forces. But the question is, how are they able to do this? How else? But with impunity and support from the Afghan Taliban. You see, these attacks have risen in number only after August 2021. That is when the Taliban took control of Kabul. Before that, the TTP had become a dormant organization. It was restricted to its hideouts in the hills. But ever since the Taliban's return, this terror outfit seems to have found a new lease of life. The attacks on Pakistan's security forces are proof.
Alhamdulillah.
And that's not even the worst part. What's even worse is the fact that even the Afghan Taliban is clashing with Pakistani forces. You could call it double trouble. Look at this map now. This is the Chaman-Spin Boldak port, a major border crossing between Afghanistan and Pakistan. It has been shut for trade and transit. Why? Because of a clash between security forces from both sides. The clash unfolded on the 13th of November. It started after an unidentified Afghan man killed a Pakistani guard posted on the border. This led to both sides opening fire at each other. The scuffle went on till late at night. There's no word on how many people died. It's been more than 5 days. The issue remains unresolved. The border crossing remains shut. Pakistan says it will not open the border until the suspect is detained and handed over. They have asked the Afghan Taliban to do so urgently. But the Taliban, on the other hand, maintains that they were not involved in the shooting. They say the attacker was a terrorist, not a Taliban official. It's funny that we've come to a point where the two are seen as distinct individuals. In any case, the story is getting bigger simply because it's harming people. Thousands of Afghans use this border daily. Goods worth millions pass through it every week. But ever since the border got shut down, both the people and the goods have been stranded. This has led to shortages in surrounding areas, and the prices of food items are now skyrocketing. On Wednesday, a Taliban delegation visited the border and held talks with Pakistan's security forces. But the efforts to reopen the border failed. Pakistan remains firm on its stance. It wants the attacker apprehended. What explains such firmness? Well, a host of factors, the biggest being Pakistan's suspicion that the Afghan Taliban is colluding with its homegrown TTP. It is judging the incident based on its timing. The TTP is attacking Pakistani policemen, and on the border, Pakistani soldiers are being targeted. Islamabad probably suspects an alignment of interests, and that's crucial, because the country's finance minister is expected to visit Afghanistan to raise this very issue. Now it's amusing how quickly things have changed. Just a year back, Pakistani officials were celebrating the Taliban's return. They were singing praises of its takeover of Kabul, calling it a victory for Islam and Muslims the world over. A year on, the same Pakistan finds itself at odds with the Taliban. It is engaged in a never-ending border dispute with them, as an offshoot of the Taliban wreaks havoc internally. So I ask again, what explains this turn of events? Where are Pakistan's relations with Afghanistan headed? And how worried should Islamabad be about a resurgent TTP? To discuss this and more, I'm now being joined by our correspondent Anas Malik. Anas, thanks for joining us. Now, what can you tell us about the situation on ground, specifically at the Chaman-Spin Boldak border? What kind of negotiations are possible between Pakistan and Afghanistan?
Well, Priyanka, at this point of time, today is day 5 of the Babe-Dosti border, the Chaman-Spin Boldak border being closed. The Pakistani side is firm. They say that the killer, who has been identified in the CCTV footages, should be apprehended. Either he should be handed over or he should be, the law should take its course. The Taliban have been assuring and they have said that they will be taking action. But at this point of time, senior Pakistani officials tell me that they are waiting for the outcome of the investigation. What we know so far is that there was a man, seemingly what the Taliban say he was an unknown individual. That is strange, because if he was actually an unknown individual, how did he manage to take a weapon all the way up till the border crossing? That's question number one. That is unanswered. He shot an FC personnel on the Pakistani side of the border. And then in the CCTV footages that have come out, it is clearly seen that another Taliban person, or seemingly Taliban, as what is being said, they tried to shoot at the CCTV as well in order to destroy the evidence. That is why the Pakistani authorities are very certain and are very keen that until the outcome of the investigation comes out, a definitive outcome of the investigation is there, then only they can probably or possibly move in some direction of regarding the reopening of the border. As I said, today is day 5, and the Babe Dosti border, the Chaman border between Pakistan and Afghanistan, it remains closed. It controls 60% of the trade between Pakistan and Afghanistan and the Afghan transit trade, ATT as we say. So it's quite dire and desperate times. We've seen the Taliban coming out saying, trying to distance themselves, saying that he was an unknown assailant. But as I said, if he was indeed an unknown assailant, then the bigger question is, how did he manage to get a weapon all the way up to the border terminal? That's a question that remains unanswered. Priyanka.
Right, Anas, thanks for all those details and thanks for joining us on Gravitas tonight. Let's move on and talk about conflict further on the show tonight. Do you have any idea how the United States got its name? Earlier, the country was called the United Colonies. It was only in 1776 that it became the United States of America. The credit for the name is given to Thomas Jefferson. He was an American president. He thought the name United States symbolized freedom and independence. And of course, unity. But why am I telling you this story tonight? Because never before in recent history has the United States looked so divided. Never before has its name seemed so ironical, especially when you put in the context of the divided state of America. You must have seen the big news coming from Washington. The Republicans have successfully taken control of the House of Representatives. This is the lower house of the Congress. There are 435 seats, and Republicans have managed to back 218 of them. It's a slim majority, but a majority still. But in the Senate, it's the opposite. Democrats retain its control. What does this mean? It means a divided Congress. There is also division within the House of Representatives.
Mrs. Fisher.
There seems to be an absence of consensus among the Republicans as to who the House Speaker should be. Currently, it is Nancy Pelosi. But she is a Democrat and she will have to vacate her chair. So who will replace Pelosi? This is Kevin McCarthy. He is a Republican and he has been the House Minority Leader since 2019. McCarthy is the obvious frontrunner to be the Speaker, but there is a divide within the Republicans. There are some who would rather Andy Biggs become the Speaker. Biggs is a far-right Republican from Arizona. To become a Speaker, a candidate needs 218 votes. Republicans have 218 seats in the House. Of them, 31 support Biggs. And the stress test is due for January. Here's another problem. Republicans are also divided on who their 2024 presidential candidate should be. We have been telling you about the growing support for Ron DeSantis and how, following their midterm performance, Republicans seem to have lost confidence in former President Donald Trump. You see, Republicans were expecting a red wave. There wasn't one. And now people believe that Donald Trump may be done. But Trump is firm. He is not turning back. Instead, he is talking policy and about building another border wall.
Help is on the way. Joe Biden has abolished America's borders. We are going to restore and secure America's borders just like we had them before, best ever. We built the wall, and now we will add to it. Now, we built the wall. We completed the wall.
But for that, Trump needs to win and needs the Republican mandate. But like we just told you, the Republicans are divided, just like the divided Congress. The question is, what does the divided state of America mean for Americans? The two houses are supposed to work together. to enact new laws that the country needs. This coordination is critical because the House can only table tax-related bills. But it needs the Senate's review and approval. The Senate, on the other hand, has the sole power to approve foreign treaties. So, for the sake of both domestic and international policies, you need the two chambers of the US Congress to work together, to cooperate. And it is all the more important during times like these, where the world is in the middle of a conflict. But that cooperation is not in sight, at least not till the 2024 presidential election. Because for the next 2 years, the Republicans have their agenda set. 1, to expose Biden's failure, and 2, to probe his son, Hunter Biden. Republicans plan to use their majority to launch a congressional investigation into Biden's handling of the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, his oversight of the US-Mexican border, and his son Hunter Biden's overseas businesses. So where does all this politics leave critical policies? In good hands if Republicans are to be believed. They are calling it the era of checks and balances.
I'm proud to announce the era of one-party Democrat rule in Washington is over. Washington now has a check and balance.
You see, checks and balances are one aspect, a divide quite another. Checks and balances is where every pillar of a democracy is checked by another, prevented from becoming too powerful. Checks and balances are critical for the functioning and survival of a democracy. But polarization risks making the democracy fail. So does a divide like America's. A divide is what kills critical policies. Today, the divided state of America is such that it will be almost impossible to advance any legislative agenda. The Republican-held House can block any bill passed from the Democratic Senate. Because let's face it, why would Republicans want the Democrats to make policy wins with just 2 years to go for the presidential election? And the same is true vice versa. When the Republicans manage to pass a bill in the House, the Senate will block it. Where does this leave legislation on important issues like abortion or gun rights? US President Joe Biden wants America to believe a divided Congress will work together.
I'm prepared to work with my Republican colleagues. The American people have made clear, I think, that they expect Republicans to be prepared to work with me as well.
But that's highly unlikely because, like we told you, the two sides have their own agenda. And as the presidential election draws closer, the divided state of America will only worsen. Back to my question. Where does this leave all Americans? Let me now tell you what's happening in Iran. The anti-government protests there have entered the 3rd month. Street violence continues unabated, as does the Iranian regime's crackdown. According to reports, Iran has sentenced 4 more people to death. The charge they face is enmity against God, more like enmity against the Iranian regime. You see, all 4 people, given the death sentence, had participated in anti-government protests. They will now have to pay for it with their life. Iran expects these death sentences will scare the demonstrators and make them submit. But that's not happening. Look at the images on your screens now. They're from the Gilan province. These people are marching against the death sentences, chanting death to the dictator. Look at these images now. They're from the city of Bukhan, situated in the northwest. What you see are protesters surrounding a municipality building and throwing documents in the air. The siege went on till late at night. Reports claim that Bukhan streets are now under the control of protesters. They're patrolling them armed with sticks and flags, calling upon the city's residents to join their cause. The Iranian regime says the demonstrators have also killed 2 Iranian troops, but their claim cannot be verified. But it's being used as an excuse to carry targeted attacks on protesters. Take this one, for instance. These images are from a metro station in Tehran. What you see are women passengers writing slogans on a whiteboard inside a metro. They immediately came under attack from security officials stationed outside. They fired tear gas on the protesters as the women screamed, "Don't shoot." These images are disturbing, to say the least. The crackdown is no longer restricted to the regime. It seems some Iranian citizens are doing their bidding. They have joined the government in curbing the protests. Take a look at this headline. In southern Iran, unidentified assailants on motorbikes killed 9 people in 2 separate attacks. The casualties included a woman and 2 children. Who were these gunmen? Were they Iranian citizens or government officials? There's no clarity. Back in Tehran, the violence has disrupted daily life and shut down markets across the city. This was due to a strike called on Tuesday to commemorate the 2019 protests over fuel price, a display of dissent that was crushed by security forces. 3 years on, Iranians are using the ongoing protests to vent their anger against the Iranian regime. So what does this tell you? That the protests are no longer about the headscarf. They've become a fight for basic human rights, the right to speak, the right to assemble freely, and the right to a future devoid of the state's arbitrary rules and regulations. And now I want you to take a look at the kind of people that are protesting. They're not just the average Iranian citizen, but individuals from all walks of life. On your screen is an image of Taraneh Ali Dosti, one of Iran's most popular actors. She recently posted a picture of herself without the headscarf. She held a sign that read "Women, Life and Freedom." And Ali Dosti is not alone in doing so. There are a host of others, like Saman Ghoddos, a member of Iran's national football team. He recently said that the upcoming FIFA World Cup should be used as a platform to demand change. He recently told this to a newspaper. Allow me to quote, "I don't want to mix politics with football, but football is coming to the side right now because people are losing their lives fighting for freedom. Clearly a change needs to come, and it's already been going on for so long. We all want to change." A host of other footballers have echoed these sentiments, like Wafa Hakamaneshi. During a match, he removed his jersey to display a message in support of the protests. And then we have Ali Dai, Iran's record goal scorer, who is now a businessman. He also expressed his sympathy towards the protesters and decided to skip the upcoming FIFA World Cup. Like I said, these protests may have started over the hijab. They may have been triggered by women activists, but they have taken a completely new shape in life ever since. They seem to have become an all-encompassing movement against the draconian way that the Iranian regime functions. There's no saying what form these protests might take in the days ahead. We'll, of course, continue to track this story. But I have to say, one of the things that Iranian footballer Ali Dai highlighted was that people should use the World Cup as a platform for protest. If they choose to do so, it won't be a first. So tonight on the Gravitas Countdown to Qatar, we look at how over the years players, fans and hosts have used the tournament as a platform for protest, and we also question, can this happen in Qatar? Take a look.
The 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar kicks off this Sunday. The build-up to this mega event has been controversial. Qatar's human rights record has been repeatedly brought up, and their anti-LGBTQ laws have also been a flashpoint.
The Supreme Committee, the International Labour Organization, FIFPro, and most importantly, the migrant workers of Qatar.
The kafala system has largely been dismantled.
Their implementation remains inconsistent and requires improvement.
The LGBTI plus people.
Effective remedy for those who have been denied their rights, and the decriminalization of all same-sex relationships.
Denmark will wear a toned-down jersey as a mark of protest. The captains of many teams, including England's Harry Kane, Wales's Gareth Bale and the Netherlands' Virgil van Dijk, among others, plan to defy FIFA by wearing rainbow armbands with "One Love" written on them. The World Cup could also see Iranian players lend solidarity to the protests back home over women's rights. But is this the first time a World Cup is being used as a protest platform? The answer is no. In 2006, Germany welcomed 31 other nations for the mega event. Among them was Iran. Ahead of Iran's match against Mexico, thousands raised their voices against Iran's then-president Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who described the Holocaust as a myth and wanted Israel wiped off the map. Fast forward 8 years to Brazil. The build-up to the World Cup was marred by protests and violence. Brazilians took to the streets to show their dissent towards the astronomical amount of public money spent on the month-long event. Even as foreign fans flocked to the iconic beaches and stadiums, Romário, a World Cup winner with Brazil, dubbed the 2014 World Cup as the biggest theft in history. Russia hosted the 2018 edition. There were calls to strip Russia of the hosting right for their annexation of Crimea, but FIFA did not rock the boat. Fair or Football Against Racism in Europe, an organization set up to counter discrimination in European football, warned traveling LGBTQ supporters to not hold hands in public. Protest group Pussy Riot, known critics of the Vladimir Putin regime, invaded the pitch during the final between France and Croatia. World Cup teams are already in Qatar or flying in, and they are showing support for the migrant workers who built the futuristic stadiums, playing football with them. But FIFA wants them to focus on the football. After all, protests don't look good on TV. And remember, a global audience of more than 3 billion is expected to tune in.
Right, enough of politics and conflict now. Let's talk about something simpler, like your phone charger. Have you ever struggled to find the right cable when your phone runs out of juice? Does your bag have a bunch of tangled cables? One to charge your phone, a different one to charge your tablet, and an altogether different cable for your earphones. Well, if you are in India, you may not need to carry so many cables in the future, especially if you use an iPhone. You see, India could shift to a universal charger for all. The Indian government is considering a proposal. If it goes through, then only 2 kinds of chargers will remain in use. One that will be compatible for all devices, and another one for low-cost feature phones, those that come with a keypad. Now, how would that look like for the average consumer, people like you and me? It means we'll be left with just this charger, the USB Type-C. It stands for Universal Serial Bus Type-C. I'm not going to bore you with a technical definition of that, but just focus on one word: universal. The USB Type-C is an industry standard. Anyone has the option to use it. The Type-C cable is common in Android phones. There is only one player perhaps who doesn't like the Type-C. No prizes for guessing, it's Apple. It is the only major manufacturer that has not embraced the Type-C. Apple has its own way to charge its phones and other devices. The company calls it the Lightning Charger. It works just like the Type-C, but these cables are completely different from each other. You cannot use a Type-C cable on an iPhone. A Lightning cable will not work on an Android. But now if the Indian government gets its way, you'll only need one charger in your bag, the Type-C. A task force has been set up. The government is holding wide-ranging consultations. There seems to be a broad consensus for a universal charger. India won't be the first one to do this. Recently, the European Union announced a universal charger mandate. In 2024, all devices there will ship with a Type-C port. You must have figured that Apple is a clear loser here. Initially, the company tried to push back. When European lawmakers were discussing the idea, Apple wrote to them. It argued that a universal charger will stifle innovation. Apple couldn't sway the EU with that argument. It will have to follow the new rules and ship its products with a Type-C port in 2024. Now that asks the question, why did Brussels push for universal chargers? In 2021, a European leader explained the benefits. Listen in.
This approach alone will allow us to save 1,000 tons of electronic waste per year, 2,600 tons less of raw materials, and also because it is now an indicator that we must also look at, in any case, my portfolio. We make sure that we measure it now more and more. The impact on CO2 is a saving of 180,000 tons of equivalent CO2.
Dans mon portefeuille, on fait en sorte qu'on le mesure maintenant.
Now let me explain. The EU rules are designed to reduce e-waste. India's proposal seems to be targeted at e-waste as well. Take a look at these numbers. In 2021, India generated 5 million tons of e-waste. India is the third largest producer of e-waste in the world, just behind China and the United States. And you don't really need numbers to understand how serious a problem this is, I'm sure. Many of you have drawers filled with the mess of old cables and chargers, perhaps a friend who is still hoarding old and obsolete gadgets. Maybe they don't know where to take them or how to dispose them of. There is good reason for that. More than 95% of e-waste in India is handled by the informal sector. So India is already staring at a huge mountain of e-waste. How can we tackle this problem? Reducing the sheer number of chargers we use is a good starting point, an easy fix. However, it remains to be seen how India will approach this. Will New Delhi bring in a law to implement universal chargers, or will it take another approach? We'll all have to wait and see what happens next. And from friendly gadgets, let's talk about unfriendly tech CEOs. No prizes for guessing. This story is about Elon Musk. But why am I calling him unfriendly? Because he has issued an ultimatum to all Twitter employees. He has given them only two options: commit to a new hardcore Twitter or leave the company with severance pay. Musk has shot off another email to his employees. In it, he describes his vision for the company, and Musk calls it Twitter 2.0. The chief twit has clear expectations from employees. He says they need to be extremely hardcore. They will have to work long hours at high intensity, he says. Engineers in the company will be given more importance. I'll now quote from Musk's email. Twitter will also be much more engineering driven. Design and product management will still be very important and report to me, but those writing great code will constitute the majority of our team and have the greatest sway. Is that really the right way to run a platform that is fundamentally about conversations between people? Well, let us know what you think about this. But coming back to Musk and his so-called hardcore philosophy, he seems to be taking it quite seriously. Listen in.
Oh, man.
I have too much work on my plate, that is for sure. No, I think that's a great idea. Twitter for sure, I think, needs to do a lot more on video. And it's kind of a no-brainer to enable a longer video on Twitter and also enable content creators to make a living with content that they submit to Twitter.
Musk made those remarks a few days ago during the G20 summit. Honestly, they don't come as a surprise. Musk is well known for what many call the hustle culture. He's said to be sleeping at the headquarters of Twitter these days. One of his managers did the same recently. Her photograph went viral. But there are people who are raising questions about Musk's method. This week, the serial entrepreneur took the stand at a court in Delaware. His electric car company, Tesla, has been sued. The case, interestingly, is about Musk's own compensation package in 2018. Reports say it was potentially more than $50 billion. $50 billion. Going by some claims, this payout helped him become the world's richest man. The lawsuit alleges that Musk's pay package was unjust enrichment. Musk took the stand to defend himself. How does he explain that multi-billion-dollar payout? Musk told the court that Tesla was in crisis back in 2017, and he gave the company his full attention. Consider these statements now. I pretty much work all the time. I don't know what a punch clock would achieve. Musk said he wouldn't accept a compensation plan that would need him to commit a certain number of hours. The irony isn't lost on us. But the lawsuit is not about the number of hours that Musk works. It is about Musk's relationship with the board members of Tesla. It is alleged that Musk has stacked the company board with friends, and they do his bidding when needed. Musk also faces the charge of influencing that whopping $50 billion payout. Some details have emerged from court documents. Reports say in 2017, Musk outlined his agreement with Ira Ehrenpreis. He's a director at Tesla and he headed the board's compensation committee. But Musk's testimony stretched beyond the complaints against his compensation. He was asked about his Twitter takeover and whether he intends to stay on as the CEO. Musk claimed before the court that he intends to take a step back at some point. He was even asked about Tesla, the Tesla that he sent to space. He called the event an art piece that will last millions of years. There's no denying that Musk never fails to entertain, but the fact is he now faces intense scrutiny, and that is no laughing matter. Let me move on now. 8 years ago, a flight was shot down in Ukraine, MH17. How many of you remember that story? Well, earlier today, a Dutch court delivered its verdict in the case. It sentenced 3 men to life in prison and acquitted another man. But here's the thing, none of these men were in custody. They were not arrested. Our next report has more.
The story begins in 2014. Eastern Ukraine was in the middle of a conflict. Russia-backed separatists were fighting government forces. On the 17th of July, Malaysian airline Flight 17 took off from Amsterdam at 10:31 UTC, or Coordinated Universal Time. MH17 was on its way to Kuala Lumpur. The flight time was 11.5 hours. There were 283 passengers on board from at least 10 nationalities. Among them was scientist Joep Lange. He was going to Melbourne for an AIDS conference. The flight path included crossing eastern Ukraine. The plane was flying at 33,000 feet, which was the minimum altitude restriction put in place by the Ukrainian authorities just 3 days ago. At around 13:26, the flight disappeared from the radar. Locals from Ukraine's Rozhipne clearly remember that day.
The main thing is that the Boeing did not spin, but was simply gliding down, and something was coming off. It glided down to the very end, and something came off. People were probably falling down.
I saw something burning and thought, what could it be? But then the women said that a plane crashed. I thought a Ukrainian military one was shot down. That were my thoughts. But then I saw people lying everywhere and thought probably it was a military transport plane.
The plane's wreckage was scattered over 50 square kilometers. Most of it was found in a rebel-held area of Ukraine. All 283 passengers on board died, as did the 15 crew members. The rebels handed over the flight's black box to Malaysian authorities. Investigators began putting together the pieces. Was it bad weather that brought down the plane, or was it pilot error or some malfunction? All possibilities were ruled out. Investigators concluded that the plane was brought down by a missile. Not just any missile, but one fired from a BUK surface-to-air system. What's interesting is that the missile never really hit the plane. Instead, it exploded just a few feet away from the cockpit. The weaponry was brought in from Russia. It was also returned to the country the same day. In July 2019, Dutch prosecutors filed charges against 4 men, 3 Russian and 1 Ukrainian.
The most important thing is not the verdict itself, but what will happen after it. The fact is that the missile can't move independently without a top-down decision. It means that someone authorized to move it outside of the Russian Federation, and it was a high-ranking military or a political chief. That which is the investigation on the missile launch took already 8 years as far as I know. But this is not the end of the process. This is just the first phase.
Before I end the show, I want to ask you a question. We know about Generation X, anyone born before 1980. We know about Generation Y, otherwise known as Millennials. We know about Generation Z or Gen Z. What comes after that? We've run out of letters, but a whole new generation is now emerging. The oldest of whom are on the cusp of turning just 10. Meet Generation Alpha. Why should you care? Because it is emerging as the most influential generation yet. Why do I say that? Firstly, it is the first generation to be born entirely in the 21st century. Think about that. They could be the kids of millennials or siblings of Gen Z. Researchers say they may be the best educated, most tech-savvy and the most empowered generation ever. And so, they could be influencing lifestyle choices, yours, mine, family choices. What we should eat, how we should spend our money, how we should feel about emerging trends. You may be wondering, they're just kids, right? What do they know? You'll be surprised. While some of us have had to learn how to use technology, these are digital natives. They are the youngest consumers. They are aware of pressing issues. Try having a conversation with them. They know about climate change, changing trends, even war. They're well informed and opinionated. The term Generation Alpha came from social researcher Mark McCrindle in 2008. He says this generation comprises more than 1 in 7 people. They are the key to the future. Within the next 4 years, they will outnumber the baby boomers. Many will live to see the 22nd century. There are more than 2.8 million of them born globally every week. So if businesses want to flourish in a decade from now, they must understand this generation. Well, it is ironic that the most important generation of the future shoppers can't even drive just yet. But they can definitely buy, and marketeers and social media analysts have caught on to it. Generation Alpha is armed with gadgets and they know how to shop online. If you look at research, it says that in 2020, 81% of children under 12 years globally influence buying decisions. This translates to roughly $500 billion. That gives you a sense of their power to spend and influence. But I repeat, they're just kids. They may be guinea pigs for brands to study for future profit, but their parents need to watch out for what influences them. from fleeting social media trends to influencers as role models. They are exposed to elements that previous generations never thought about. Their self-worth is guided by plenty of external factors. So if they are the future, protect them. Else we're all headed for trouble. And that's a wrap on the show. Thanks for watching with me, Priyanka Sharma, leaving you as always with Gravitas Images.
Mẹ